They laughed at her, the office whispered behind her back, sneering at the cleaning lady who had been invisible for years. No one thought she mattered, no one thought she noticed, but that day something changed, something small at first, a glance, a silent defiance. But it grew into something unstoppable. By the time the boardroom doors opened, no one could have predicted what would happen next. The same people who mocked her were about to witness a moment that would turn their world upside down. How could someone so underestimated hold the power to change everything in a single shocking moment? Every morning Maria walked the same path to the office building, mop in hand, gloves tucked neatly into her apron. She wasn't just a cleaning lady. She was a mother, a daughter, someone who carried a world of responsibilities on her shoulders. The office staff barely noticed her, their eyes sliding past as if she were invisible. She smiled politely when greeted, nodded at passing coworkers, and kept her head down, accustomed to being overlooked. But beneath that quiet exterior was a woman who had seen enough injustice to know how far people could go when they thought no one was watching. For years she had endured whispered jokes, condescending glances, and outright dismissals, all because of the color of her skin and the uniform she wore. She kept her dignity, but every insult etched a quiet determination into her mind. Today, however, was different. Today the same people who laughed at her would be forced to see her not as the cleaning lady, not as a background character, but as someone who could no longer be ignored. Something was brewing in the air, a tension nobody could yet name, and Maria felt it deep in her bones. Whatever was about to happen, it would change everything. Maria moved through the polished floors of the corporate headquarters with practiced ease, the mop gliding silently behind her. She had done this 1,000 times, yet today the atmosphere felt different, heavier. The laughter started softly, barely audible at first, from the corner office where the junior executives gathered. They were pointing at her, whispering cruel jokes, smirking as if she couldn't hear them. She kept walking, her jaw tight, each step echoing against their mockery. Their amusement was sharp, cutting deeper than any words could, fueled not just by her position but by the color of her skin. It wasn't new, the subtle slights, the overt condescension, the way her ideas or observations were dismissed if she dared to speak. They were all part of a pattern she had endured for years, but today it was different. Today she felt the quiet storm inside her swelling, ready to erupt. A discarded paper towel tossed by a careless intern landed near her feet, and instead of ignoring it she picked it up, her movements deliberate, almost ceremonial. The room went silent for a split second, the laughter dying mid-chuckle as heads turned toward her. Then came the CEO's laugh. Loud, brash, dismissive. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, and made a comment meant to humiliate her in front of everyone, a casual, cutting insult about her job, about her worth, about her place in that room. Maria's hands trembled. Not with fear but with controlled fury. The years of being overlooked, the whispered prejudices, the casual racism that she had endured without complaint, all surged through her in that moment. The air seemed to thicken, charged with tension. Colleagues exchanged uneasy glances, some tried to mask their discomfort with forced smiles, while others leaned forward, curious, sensing that the expected humiliation would not go as usual. Maria took a slow breath, her eyes scanning the room, landing finally on the CEO, smug and oblivious. Every mocking laugh, every patronizing nod, every dismissive gesture had been stored, catalogued in her mind. This wasn't just about one insult, one act of condescension, it was about years of systemic disregard. She moved toward the boardroom door, her steps measured but unstoppable. The room fell quiet as she entered, heads turned, whispers began, and the CEO's smirk faltered. For the first time that morning the air crackled with anticipation, a mixture of disbelief and curiosity. Something was about to happen that no one could predict. Maria's presence alone, once ignored, now commanded attention. Every eye followed her as she approached the center of the room, her mind sharp, her resolve unshakable. And then, just as the CEO opened his mouth to mock her again, the board members paused. Phones were subtly raised, the tension palpable. Everyone in the room sensed it. Something unprecedented was about to unfold. Maria's hand hovered, ready to act, as if the years of injustice had built up into a single moment of reckoning. What she would do next could change everything, not just for her but for everyone who had ever been dismissed, overlooked, or underestimated. And in that instant the office, her world, the place where she had long been invisible, held its breath. Maria stopped at the center of the boardroom, every eye fixed on her. The CEO leaned back, smirk widening, completely unprepared for what was about to happen. For a moment the room was suspended in silence, the kind that makes every heartbeat echo loudly. She could feel the weight of years pressing down. The years of being overlooked, dismissed and ridiculed for nothing more than the color of her skin and the uniform she wore. Anger sharpened by decades of injustice surged through her veins, replacing fear with a strange clarity. Slowly, deliberately, she reached for the folder she had kept hidden in her bag. Inside were documents, proofs of mismanagement, of negligence, of decisions that had cost the company millions. She had collected them quietly, unnoticed, because no one believed a cleaning lady could understand the inner workings of the business. But she did. She had watched, she had learned, and now the evidence was in her hands. The CEO's smirk faltered as she began to lay out the facts, numbers, memos, emails. irrefutable proof of mistakes and corruption that he had hoped would remain invisible. The board members leaned forward, some whispering, others wide-eyed, as Maria spoke with precision and authority that no one had expected. The same people who had laughed at her were now frozen, realizing too late that their assumptions about her were completely wrong. For the first time the power dynamic had shifted. The room that had once been her cage was now her stage. The CEO, once untouchable, was caught in the spotlight, exposed. He opened his mouth, but no words could save him. The murmurs grew louder, a ripple of disbelief spreading across the board. Maria's heart pounded, but she felt a calm certainty as she delivered the final piece of evidence, sealing the moment. The boardroom, once filled with mockery, now held a stunned silence, and then, with the weight of truth pressing down, Maria raised her hand and in one decisive move changed the course of everything. The CEO's fate, once untouchable, hung in the balance. Would justice finally be served, or was this just the beginning of a reckoning that no one would forget? The boardroom remained silent for a long moment, as if the walls themselves were absorbing what had just happened. The CEO, once untouchable, was escorted out, his smug confidence replaced by stunned defeat. Maria stood tall, still holding the folder, her chest rising and falling with a quiet but unstoppable pride. The laughter and mockery that had defined her days in that office were gone, replaced by respect, tentative at first but undeniable. For the first time she felt seen, not for her job title but for her courage, her intelligence, and her refusal to be invisible. Yet the impact went far beyond a single boardroom. Her story rippled through the company, inspiring whispers of change, challenging assumptions, and igniting conversations that had long been avoided. People began to ask themselves uncomfortable questions. How many others had been overlooked? How many voices had been silenced simply because of skin color or social status? Maria's moment of triumph was not just personal. It was a mirror held up to the system, exposing the subtle and overt ways injustice persists in workplaces, in communities, and in society at large. For Maria the victory was bittersweet. She knew the struggle against prejudice was far from over, but she also knew that one act of courage could start a ripple effect, a shift in perception that no policy or memo could enforce. She had proven that dignity and truth could not be ignored, that even those deemed powerless could hold immense influence when armed with knowledge and conviction. Her story leaves a question for all of us. How often do we dismiss, underestimate, or ignore someone based on appearances? How long will we let bias go unchallenged before we act? Maria's courage reminds us that change begins when someone refuses to stay silent, when someone refuses to accept the world as it is and decides to reshape it with courage, clarity, and resolve. What part will you play when injustice walks past you unseen?